Formal incident briefings. Verified video proof. Direct accountability. Welcome to Bodycam Incident Reports.
I am detecting a strong odor of raw marijuana emanating from the interior of your vehicle. That gives me probable cause.
For the record, there is no odor. You are fabricating probable cause. You are making a permanent mistake, officer.
At 4:15 a.m., the affluent suburbs of Oak Ridge County were buried in a heavy, damp silence. The streetlights cast long, pale yellow pools over the manicured lawns and gated driveways of million-dollar homes. A thick layer of morning mist clung to the cold asphalt of County Highway 119, the main artery connecting the wealthy enclaves to the rural lake districts up north. David Banks needed the absolute quiet. 5 days a week, he existed in the epicenter of the worst fractures of human society. 5 days a week, he wore a heavy black robe, sat behind a raised mahogany bench in courtroom 302, and carried a colossal psychological weight. David Banks was the chief district judge. His signature authorized 90% of the search warrants for the county's narcotics task force. He sent violent men to prison, and he ensured the law was followed. But on this Saturday morning, he wasn't Your Honor. He was just a 55-year-old exhausted man going fishing. He was completely stripped of his tailored charcoal suits. David wore a faded green flannel shirt, heavy-duty Carhartt work jeans, and a pair of scuffed, waterproof insulated boots. A battered canvas fishing hat rested on the passenger seat next to a thermos of black coffee. His vehicle perfectly matched his attire. It was a 2005 Ford F-150. The truck was almost 20 years old, its original dark blue paint chipped along the wheel wells and faded by the sun. But mechanically, it was flawless. Hitched to the back was a 15-foot aluminum bass tracker boat, secured with heavy-duty ratchet straps. The cabin smelled of old vinyl, pine air freshener, and the faint, permanent scent of lake water. The speedometer was deadlocked by cruise control at exactly 45 miles per hour. Both of his large, calloused hands rested confidently on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. He didn't keep his wallet in the glove box or the center console. It was securely buttoned inside the left breast pocket of his flannel shirt. On the dashboard, clipped into a plastic holder right next to the windshield defroster, his state fishing license was clearly visible. Everything was transparent. He took a sip from his thermos and glanced in the rearview mirror. 2 miles behind him, hidden in the pitch-black cutout of an abandoned way station, Officer Shane Cooper was fighting off the crushing boredom of the graveyard shift. Before we continue, hit that like and subscribe if you believe in real accountability, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from today? Cooper was 26 years old, tightly wound, and aggressively ambitious. He wore the dark navy uniform of the Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department, the fabric pulled tight across his chest. His duty belt meticulously polished and loaded with heavy gear. Cooper despised patrolling the wealthy suburbs. There was no real police work here, no high-profile busts, no drug seizures, no fast track to a detective's shield, just parking citations and noise complaints. His eyes darted to the highway as the old beat-up pickup truck and aluminum boat rolled out of the morning mist, breaking the pristine aesthetic of the neighborhood. Cooper squinted, staring at the silhouette of the driver illuminated by the faint glow of the Ford's dashboard. A large black man. An old, cheap truck. 4:15 a.m. in a neighborhood where the median home price was $2 million. In the young officer's mind, the profiling instinct clicked instantly into place. He didn't belong out here. Cooper didn't see a chief district judge. He saw a target from the wrong side of town. The officer crushed his empty energy drink can, tossed it onto the passenger floorboard, and pulled the gear shift into drive. The heavy V6 engine of the police interceptor growled as Cooper rolled out of the shadows and onto the damp asphalt, pulling in 2 car lengths behind the old Ford. The Ford F-150 maintained its exact speed. In the rearview mirror, David Banks watched the silhouette of the police interceptor pull out from the way station. It fell in line, its low beams staying precisely 2 car lengths back in the dark. David didn't tap his brakes. He didn't adjust his posture. He kept his eyes on the road. Inside the cruiser, Officer Shane Cooper typed the Ford's license plate into his mobile data terminal. The system buffered, then returned a hit. Registered owner, DB Blind Trust. No physical home address. Just a P.O. box in the downtown financial district. To Cooper, it meant someone hiding assets. He stared at the Ford's rear tires, waiting. Towing a 15-foot aluminum boat on a damp, winding highway requires minor steering adjustments. As the road curved gently to the right, the F-150's passenger side rear tire drifted. The rubber brushed the painted solid white fog line for a fraction of a second before recentering. That was enough. Cooper's hand moved to the center console. He flipped the switch. Instantly, the blinding strobe of red and blue LED light bars erupted, reflecting violently off the aluminum hull of the Bass Tracker and flooding the cabin of the Ford. David Banks saw the lights flash in his mirrors. His heart rate did not spike. He activated his right turn signal, smoothly decelerated, and pulled the truck and trailer completely off the asphalt onto the wide gravel shoulder. He shifted the transmission into park. He turned off the ignition, pulled the key from the cylinder, and placed it on the center console. He pressed the button to roll down the driver's side window completely, then reached up and switched on the interior dome light. Finally, he placed both of his large, calloused hands flat on the top of the steering wheel. He sat in absolute silence, waiting. Cooper parked his cruiser at an angle, positioning the heavy engine block between himself and the truck. He stepped out into the cold morning air, his right hand resting instinctively on the retention hood of his holstered sidearm. He walked up the driver's side, his boots crunching loudly on the gravel. He tapped the rear taillight of the boat trailer with his left hand, leaving a fingerprint, a habit drilled into him at the academy. He moved past the truck bed and stopped slightly behind the B-pillar of the cab, keeping himself out of the driver's direct line of sight. He clicked on his heavy tactical flashlight. He didn't point it at the dashboard or the driver's hands. He aimed the blinding white beam directly into David Banks's face. David instinctively narrowed his eyes against the glare, but he didn't turn his head or move his hands from the wheel. "Evening," Cooper said. His voice was loud, carrying a sharp manufactured edge of authority. "You know why I pulled you over?" "I have no reason to believe I committed a traffic infraction, officer," David replied. His baritone voice was flat, carrying the precise, unhurried cadence of a courtroom. Cooper frowned. He lowered the flashlight just enough to illuminate David's faded flannel shirt and the worn Carhartt jeans. It didn't fit. "You touched the white line back there about a mile," Cooper stated, leaning slightly closer to the open window. Swerving around. "You been drinking tonight?" "I am entirely sober," David said, his eyes fixed straight ahead on the dark highway. "I am traveling to Lake Oconee. My cruise control was set to the legal limit of 45 miles per hour. "I didn't ask about your cruise control," Cooper snapped, his tone shifting from authoritative to condescending. "Whose truck is this?" "It is my vehicle." "It's registered to a trust," Cooper challenged. "So I'll ask you again, who owns the truck?" "I am the primary trustee and the registered owner of the vehicle," David answered smoothly. He didn't raise his voice. He offered no extraneous information. Cooper stared at the side of the man's face. The absolute lack of intimidation felt like a direct challenge to his authority. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Cooper demanded, "and keep your hands exactly where I can see them while you get it." "My state fishing license is visible on the dashboard," David said, his hands remaining locked on the steering wheel. "My driver's license, registration, and insurance are in a wallet, secured in my left breast pocket. I am going to reach for it now." "Move slow," Cooper warned, his hand tightening over his holster. David unbuttoned the left breast pocket of his flannel shirt. He moved with exaggerated, deliberate slowness, using only his thumb and index finger. He pulled the thick leather wallet free and rested it on the steering wheel under the warm glow of the dome light. He did not open the wallet entirely. He extracted his state driver's license, the vehicle registration, and the insurance card. He slid the wallet back into his pocket, buttoned it, and handed the stack of documents through the open window. Cooper took the cards. He stepped back a half pace, keeping the blinding beam of his tactical flashlight pinned to David's chest, while he glanced down at the paperwork. "David Banks," Cooper read aloud. The name didn't register. To a patrolman working the graveyard shift, the chief district judge was just an illegible signature at the bottom of a warrant application, not a face. Cooper looked from the license to the man in the truck. He shined the light toward the back window, sweeping the beam over the packed coolers and the aluminum hull of the Bass Tracker. "You said you're the primary trustee for this blind trust," Cooper said, shifting his focus back to the driver. "That is correct," David replied, and you're heading up to Lake Oconee at 4 in the morning. Yes. Got a lot of gear back there, Cooper noted. He rested his left hand on his duty belt. Any firearms in the vehicle today, mister? Banks? Any weapons I need to be aware of? There are no firearms or weapons in the vehicle, David said. Any large amounts of currency? Any illegal narcotics? No. Cooper paused. The crisp, unhesitating answers offered no conversational footholds. The driver wasn't nervous. He wasn't stammering. He wasn't breaking eye contact against the glare of the flashlight. All right, Cooper said, his tone shifting into a practiced, casual rhythm. Since you don't have anything illegal on you, you wouldn't mind stepping out and letting me take a quick look inside the cab. Make sure everything is secure. David kept his hands flat on the top of the steering wheel. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle, my person, or my property, David said. The refusal hung in the cold, damp air. Cooper's jaw tightened. The casual rhythm vanished. The polite, robotic compliance of a routine traffic stop was gone, replaced by a hard, unyielding legal boundary. I'm not asking for a full inventory, Cooper said, his voice dropping an octave, pressing the issue. I'm asking to do a quick visual sweep for my own safety. My answer remains no, officer, David stated, his baritone voice perfectly level. You do not have my consent. Cooper stared at the man. The absolute lack of deference, the rigid adherence to constitutional rights from a man driving a 20-year-old rusted pickup, felt like a direct challenge. Step out of the vehicle, Cooper ordered. Are you legally ordering me out of my vehicle? David asked. I am. Step out of the truck and step to the rear, now. David didn't argue. He knew the law. He knew the exact Supreme Court precedent that allowed an officer to order a driver out of a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop. He pulled the interior handle and pushed the heavy metal door open. He stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. Standing at his full height, David was 2 inches taller than Cooper and significantly broader across the shoulders. He didn't square up to the officer. He shut the driver's side door with a solid thud, walked slowly to the rear quarter panel of the Ford, and stopped. Turn around, face the truck, Cooper commanded, stepping in close behind him. David turned, placing both of his large hands flat against the cold, damp metal of the truck bed. Spread your feet. David moved his boots apart, planting them firmly in the gravel. Cooper stepped into the gap. He unclipped his radio mic. Dispatch, Unit 4 Bravo. I have one male out of the vehicle on County Highway 119. Run a check on a David Banks. Cooper finished a rapid pat-down of David's outer clothing. He felt the heavy wallet in the breast pocket, but no weapons. He stepped back. The radio on his shoulder hissed. Unit 4. Bravo, subject is clear and valid. No active warrants. Cooper stared at the broad back of the man, leaning against the rusted truck. He had a clean ID, a valid license, and zero legal justification to breach the doors of the F-150. But Cooper's profiling instinct was too loud to ignore. He was not walking away from a potential drug bust just because a guy in a flannel shirt knew how to stonewall. He needed probable cause. On a dark, empty highway, probable cause was whatever the officer said it was. Cooper reached up to the center of his chest and pressed the large button on his Axon body camera. The device beeped twice, confirming the audio was actively recording. He stepped closer to the open window of the cab and projected his voice so the microphone would pick it up perfectly. Mr. Banks, Cooper stated loudly, as I'm standing here, I am detecting a strong odor of raw marijuana emanating from the interior of your vehicle. David did not flinch. He slowly turned his head, looking over his right shoulder. He bypassed Cooper's face entirely and locked his eyes directly onto the glowing red ring of the body camera. For the record, David said, his deep baritone cutting cleanly through the damp air, there is no odor of marijuana, raw or burnt, in or around this vehicle. You are fabricating probable cause to bypass the Fourth Amendment. Cooper's face flushed in the dark. The suspect wasn't just refusing to play the game, he was narrating the constitutional violation directly into evidence. Turn your head back around, Cooper barked, his temper snapping. He grabbed David's left wrist, yanking it off the side of the truck and twisting it sharply behind the man's back. Based on the odor of narcotics, I have probable cause to search this vehicle, Cooper declared to the camera. I am detaining you for officer safety during the search. David let his arm go completely limp. He offered zero physical resistance as Cooper wrenched it upward toward his shoulder blades. You are making a permanent mistake, officer, David stated calmly. "Give me your other hand," Cooper ordered, pulling the heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. The steel handcuffs ratcheted shut over David's wrists. They were tight, the metal biting immediately into his skin, but David did not wince or complain. He stood perfectly still in the cold mist. His absolute physical compliance offered Cooper no justification to escalate the use of force. Cooper grabbed the short chain between the cuffs and guided David toward the front bumper of the police cruiser. "Have a seat on the push bar," Cooper instructed, his breathing slightly elevated from the adrenaline dump of a physical detention. "Do not move." David sat down on the cold steel tubing. The strobing red and blue lights washed over his face. He watched as the young officer walked back to the open door of the F-150. Cooper started with the cab. He leaned across the driver's seat and began pulling the interior apart. It was an aggressive, careless search. He emptied the center console, dumping loose change, charging cables, and receipts onto the passenger floorboard. He yanked the glove box downward, spilling the Ford's original owner's manual and maintenance records across the dusty floor mats. He found nothing. Cooper backed out of the cab. He walked to the rear of the truck and climbed up onto the trailer, stepping over the gunnel into the aluminum bass tracker. He aimed his flashlight into the storage compartments. He threw open the live well lid. To access a storage hatch near the bow, Cooper dragged a heavy, hard plastic cooler backward across the aluminum deck. The edge of the heavy cooler caught the tip of a custom carbon fiber spinning rod resting on the deck. The rod snapped under the shifting weight with a sharp, distinct crack. Cooper paused for a fraction of a second, looking down at the broken carbon fiber. He kicked the broken piece aside and pulled the hatch open, digging through life jackets, flares, and heavy tackle boxes, leaving them scattered across the deck. David sat on the cruiser's push bar, watching his property being torn apart. After several minutes, Cooper climbed down from the boat. His boots hit the gravel shoulder. His flashlight beams swept across the ground, illuminating nothing but the damp rocks. The cab was torn apart. The boat was a mess. There were no drugs. There was no probable cause. Cooper stood by the tailgate of the Ford. The cold morning air cooled the sweat on his neck. He looked at the Axon camera glowing red on his chest, and then he looked at the man sitting silently in the strobe lights. He was trapped by his own footage. He couldn't just take the cuffs off and let him leave. Cooper slammed the tailgate shut. The heavy metallic thud echoed down the empty highway. He turned and walked deliberately back toward the cruiser. Cooper's boots crunched on the gravel as he stopped in front of the cruiser's push bar. "Stand up," Cooper ordered. David stood. "Turn around." Cooper grabbed the short steel chain, linking the handcuffs. "You are under arrest." "State the charge," David said quietly. "Obstruction of justice," Cooper stated, projecting his voice for the microphone. "You interfered with my investigation." Cooper reached into the left breast pocket of David's faded flannel shirt. He unbuttoned the flap and pulled out the thick leather wallet. He didn't flip it open. He didn't look at the driver's license, the state bar card, or the laminated identification inside. Cooper hesitated for a fraction of a second, then tossed the wallet through the open window of the cruiser. It landed flat on the passenger seat, resting next to the crushed energy drink can. Cooper opened the rear door of the Interceptor. "Get in. Watch your head." Cooper placed his palm on the crown of David's head, pushing him downward into the cramped, hard plastic rear compartment. David folded his large frame into the seat, his cuffed hands pressed uncomfortably against his lower back. The heavy door slammed shut. Cooper walked around the front of the cruiser. He climbed into the driver's seat and pulled his door closed, sealing the cabin. He reached over to the center console and switched off the strobing light bars, leaving only the dim glow of the dashboard. He pulled the gear shift into drive and merged onto the damp asphalt of Highway 119. The torn-apart Ford F-150, the scattered tackle boxes, and the broken carbon fiber rod remained on the gravel shoulder. The cruiser pulled into the concrete sally port of the Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department. The heavy steel garage door rolled down behind them, sealing the vehicle inside. Cooper shifted into park and turned off the engine. He picked up the thick leather wallet from the passenger seat and stepped out. He opened the rear door, grabbed the short chain of the handcuffs, and guided David Banks out of the cramped cabin. They walked through the reinforced metal doors into the booking area. It was 5:10 a.m. The room was sterile, bathed in harsh fluorescent light, and entirely empty except for the personnel on duty. Behind the raised intake counter sat Desk Sergeant Miller, a 20-year veteran working the tail end of the graveyard shift. The rhythmic clatter of his keyboard echoed in the quiet room. Cooper guided David to the steel bench bolted to the wall opposite the counter. "Sit," Cooper ordered. David sat. He kept his posture straight, his cuffed hands resting against his lower back. Cooper walked up to the intake counter. He dropped the thick leather wallet onto the scuffed surface. "Got one for processing, Sarge," Cooper said, resting his hand on his duty belt. Miller didn't look up from his monitor. "Charge? Obstruction, interfering with a lawful investigation." Miller grunted. He reached out and picked up the wallet. He unbuttoned the flap and pulled out the stack of cards to begin the intake profile. He slid the state driver's license out first, then the State Bar Association card. Finally, the laminated identification card bearing the heavy gold seal of the Oak Ridge County Judiciary. The clatter of the keyboard stopped. Miller stared at the laminated card. He read the name. He read the title. Slowly, the veteran sergeant raised his head. He looked past Cooper. He looked at the large black man in the faded green flannel shirt sitting on the steel bench in handcuffs. David met his gaze. He didn't say a word. Miller's hands went completely still. He looked back down at the ID, verifying the photograph against the face of the man across the room. The silence in the booking area became absolute. The only sound left was the low hum of the fluorescent ceiling lights. "Cooper," Sergeant Miller said. His voice was completely flat. "Yeah?" Cooper asked, shifting his weight. "Take the cuffs off him." Cooper frowned. "Sarge, the subject was actively interfering. Take the handcuffs off him right now," Miller interrupted. The command was absolute, leaving zero room for interpretation. Cooper's jaw worked. He stepped back across the booking room, pulled the small black key from his belt, and inserted it into the dual keyholes. The steel jaws disengaged with two sharp clicks. David brought his arms forward. Deep red indentations circled his wrists where his weight had pulled against the metal. He did not massage them. He did not look at Cooper. He stood up from the steel bench and walked slowly to the intake counter. "Sergeant," David said. His voice was the same measured baritone that had narrated the stop on the dark highway. "Sir?" Miller answered instantly. "Is your watch commander in the building?" "Lieutenant Hayes is in his office." "Call him out here," David instructed. "And, Sergeant, initiate an immediate time-stamped preservation order on Officer Cooper's Axon body camera, the dash camera of Unit 4 Bravo, and all dispatch audio logs for the last hour." Miller didn't ask questions. He didn't attempt to de-escalate or mediate. "Yes, Your Honor, entering it into the system now." The title hit the sterile air of the booking room like a physical blow. Cooper stopped moving. The empty steel handcuffs dangled uselessly from his black tactical gloves. He looked from the large man in the faded flannel shirt to the laminated identification card resting on the scuffed counter. He saw the heavy gold seal of the Oak Ridge County Judiciary. He saw the printed text. David Banks, Chief District Judge. Cooper's breathing stopped. The adrenaline that had fueled the highway takedown evaporated, replaced instantly by a hollow, suffocating dread. The man he had just physically assaulted, handcuffed, and dragged into the station was the same man who signed 90% of his department's search warrants. David Banks didn't gloat. He didn't turn around to watch the young officer realize that his career was over. He stood at the counter in his dusty Carhartt jeans, staring blankly at the wall, waiting for the watch commander. The heavy wooden door to the watch commander's office opened. Lieutenant Hayes stepped out into the booking area. He held a ceramic coffee mug, his dark uniform crisp despite the late hour. Hayes looked toward the intake counter. He saw Sergeant Miller standing stiffly behind the keyboard. He saw Officer Cooper standing motionless, the empty steel handcuffs dangling from his gloved fingers. Then Hayes looked at the large man in the faded flannel shirt. Hayes stopped walking. He didn't gasp, and he didn't drop his coffee. He simply reached out and set the mug down on the edge of a nearby filing cabinet. His posture shifted, locking into a state of highly controlled damage control. "Judge Banks," Hayes said, his voice stripped of any casual inflection. "Lieutenant," David acknowledged. Hayes shifted his gaze to the young patrolman. "Give me your disposition, Cooper." Cooper opened his mouth. His throat worked dryly, but no words came out. He looked at the lieutenant, then at the scuffed linoleum floor, completely paralyzed by the catastrophic weight of his own actions. David didn't wait for the patrolman to find his voice. Officer Cooper initiated a pretextual traffic stop on County Highway 119, David stated. His deep voice carried no anger. It was a clinical recitation of facts. When I explicitly declined a vehicle search, he fabricated the odor of marijuana on his Axon camera to manufacture probable cause. He physically detained me, conducted a destructive search of my truck and boat, and when he found zero contraband, he arrested me for obstruction to justify the use of handcuffs. Hayes stared at Cooper. He looked at the square black casing of the body camera on the officer's chest. The LED ring was still glowing red, actively recording audio and video. "Cooper," Hayes said quietly, "turn the camera off." "No," David interrupted. The single word was absolute. It killed the lieutenant's order instantly. "The camera stays on," David instructed, his dark eyes locked onto Hayes. "It will record the remainder of this interaction for the evidentiary file. Sergeant Miller has already entered the preservation order into the system." Hayes slowly closed his mouth. He nodded once, a grim, silent acknowledgement of the legal reality. The department was completely boxed in. Every procedural exit had been systematically sealed shut by the man standing in front of him. Hayes turned his attention back to David. "Your Honor," Hayes began, measuring every syllable, "I am releasing you immediately. I will personally drive you back to your vehicle, and the county will fully reimburse you for any damages to your property. We can handle this internally." David finally reached onto the intake counter. He picked up his laminated identification card, his state bar card, and his driver's license, sliding them neatly back into his thick leather wallet. "This is not an internal matter, Lieutenant," David said. David buttoned the flap of his breast pocket. He looked at Lieutenant Hayes. "I am not looking for reimbursement, Lieutenant, and this will not be handled internally." David turned slightly, his gaze shifting to Officer Cooper for the first time since they had entered the station. Cooper stood rigidly, his face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. "That Axon camera recorded you fabricating the odor of narcotics," David said. His voice was steady, echoing off the concrete walls. "You lied to manufacture probable cause. You documented your own perjury." David looked back at the watch commander. "Lieutenant, as of this morning, this officer's credibility is permanently compromised." Hayes closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. The veteran commander knew exactly what was coming. "Under the Brady Doctrine," David continued, the legal weight of the words landing heavily in the quiet room, "every prosecutor in this jurisdiction is now legally obligated to disclose this footage to defense counsel. In every arrest he makes, in every citation he writes, he must be placed on the county disclosure list." Cooper swallowed hard. The silence in the room amplified the sound. He finally understood. A police officer who cannot testify is a liability. A cop on the Brady list cannot take the stand. If he cannot take the stand, he cannot work the streets. "Furthermore," David said, his tone absolute, "effective immediately, I am formally recusing myself from any warrant application, affidavit, or criminal proceeding bearing Officer Cooper's name. I will not sign his paperwork. I will not hear his testimony. His word is worthless in my courtroom." Dead silence fell over the booking area. The rhythmic clatter of Sergeant Miller's keyboard did not resume. David didn't demand Cooper's badge. He didn't threaten a multi-million-dollar civil lawsuit. The procedural execution was already complete. He had legally dismantled the young officer's career using nothing but the established rules of evidence and the officer's own body camera. "I will arrange my own transportation back to my vehicle," David stated. He didn't wait for Hayes to respond. He didn't look at Cooper again. David Banks turned and walked toward the heavy reinforced doors of the front lobby. The electronic lock buzzed, and the heavy door swung open, letting in the cold morning air. The door sealed shut behind him with a solid, echoing thud. Hayes stood in the center of the room. He looked at the Axon camera glowing red on Cooper's chest, and then he looked up into the young patrolman's eyes. "Take off your duty belt, Cooper," Hayes said quietly. "You're done." Officer Cooper thought he could use his badge as a weapon against a man he profiled in the dark. Instead, he handed a chief district judge the exact video evidence needed to legally erase his career. No yelling, no lawsuits, just the cold, crushing weight of the justice system working exactly as it should. But what do you guys think? Did Judge Banks handle this perfectly by putting Cooper on the Brady list? Or should he have sued the department for millions of dollars to send a louder message? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one. If you love stories where corrupt authority figures get exactly what they deserve, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Remember, true power doesn't need to scream. It just lets the law do the talking. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
This incident file is closed. For more objective footage breakdowns, please like and subscribe. Thank you for supporting Bodycam Incident Reports.